Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our webinar, Tell Me What to Eat. I'm Marta Heumann, a registered dietitian and a Pennsylvania and Delaware Wegmans nutritionist, and I will be moderating today's webinar. So please note that the information provided during today's webinar is for educational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for medical advice, medical nutrition therapy, or individualized nutrition counseling. Now I'm going to soon turn off my camera, and then I'm going to rejoin you at the end to moderate our Q&A section of the presentation. I am pleased to introduce your presenter, Kirby Bransford. She is my lovely friend and a colleague, a registered dietitian, and one of our corporate nutritionists. So it's all yours, Kirby.
Thank you so much, Marta, for that great introduction, and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us here today. I am truly happy to be here to talk about the answer to this very big question that our team gets all the time. Tell me what to eat. Although I'll say it usually goes more something like, will you just tell me what to eat? Because there's just so much information out there. And so we're hoping that we can help you cut through some of that clutter today. And as you might imagine, the answer is not necessarily straightforward, nor is it the same for everyone, nor is it always the same for you through the course of your life. So today we want to guide you on how you can find that answer to this question for your own self. And don't worry, I will give you a sense of the types of foods that we think you should consider including in your eating pattern. Now, we need to begin with an understanding of our perspective on healthy eating. No matter where you find information or guidance on healthy eating, it stems from a belief about food. So when someone gives you some advice or when you find information or guidance, it stems from that belief about food and how it supports health. So we want to start with the belief that we share here at Wegmans, which is best described with our healthy eating philosophy, which states that we believe healthy eating is about nourishing your body and mind with foods that support health, fuel movement, honor your cultures and traditions, and make you happy. Now, if you take nothing else away from today, let it be that there is no one right way to eat. There's not one specific food that you need to make sure that you include in your pattern of eating in order to enjoy good health. There's no specific food, not even a specific nutrient or amount listed here. So this is really about recognizing all foods have a purpose. There's a purpose to all foods, and all of these matter. So let this be kind of like a touchstone for you. Come back to this. So if you're ever unsure if something is the right way to eat or a right food for you, come back to this. Or if you start to get confused or something's not working as well as it had in the past, come back to this philosophy and ask, is it not kind of meeting some of these purposes for you anymore? So we'll really be working from this today. Let's take a look at each one of these pieces and talk about which foods to eat in order to accomplish these very important goals, starting with eating foods to support health. Now, based on decades of research and experience, both professionally and personally, we think that plant-forward eating is a really great starting place and a really great foundation for just about everyone, because plant-forward eating has been shown to reduce the risk for diseases like some cancers, for heart disease, depression, type 2 diabetes, and to promote overall health and longevity and quality of life. Now, eating plant-forward really just means to build meals and snacks around these foods, your plant foods, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts, seeds, and legumes. Ideally, you want to avoid having too many ultra-processed versions of these and kind of put your focus on the whole, minimally processed options within each category. But truly, this means any fruit, vegetable, grain, etc., that you enjoy. Now, I can tell you that we get questions about what specific fruits should I have, which specific vegetables. The simplest version of that is the one that's going to make it into your mouth. Iceberg lettuce, it's perfect. You don't need to eat kale in order to enjoy good health. This really should be personalized to your preferences. And this approach is about emphasizing these, but it doesn't exclude any foods. There's not a list of restricted foods to eat in order to say that you eat plant-forward. In fact, it can include things like your seafood, meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, things like that. So nothing that you're not allowed to eat. And it just means that these foods are in heavy rotation. Because they provide nutrients like vitamins, minerals, and antioxidants, Plant foods are also the sole source of fiber. You cannot get fiber from animal foods or products. Fiber is a nutrient most of us don't get enough of, and it helps you feel full. It supports heart health, gut health, and all sorts of other things we're just starting to learn about. And truly, these plant foods are the foundation for the most widely recognized healthy eating patterns across the world. So when we look and see what types of eating or approaches to eating are associated with good health outcomes, what we see is that although there's many differences, the specific types of fruits or vegetables or the specific types of grains that they have, what they have in common is that they are plant forward. So the very simplest answer to tell me what to eat would be whole and minimally processed plant foods. But of course, we don't want to stop there. Let's keep going a little bit and take a look at what to eat to fuel movement, because that's another piece of healthy eating. Now, eating to support physical activity and performance, that is a big topic. In fact, we have specialists within our field, sports dietitians, that work on this. It's highly individualized, but there are some basic tenets of eating for movement. And what you want to think about is we all want to strive for some movement, whether it's, whatever it is for you, just some joyful movement and having enough energy and nutrients before, during, and after activity to support any type of recovery. In order to do that, you need carbohydrate foods, so foods that provide carbohydrates. That's going to be a lot of those plant foods, your fruits and veggies and your grains that we just talked about, legumes, as well as some dairy options can provide carbohydrates like milk and yogurt. Those will be broken down into glucose, which is our body's preferred source of energy for movement, for thinking. It's what our body wants to use to fuel our movement. Next, you want to make sure that you have some protein foods. So foods that provide protein, some of the plant foods that we talked about would be some legumes, beans and legumes, soy foods like tofu, edamame, as well as nuts and seeds and some whole grains. And if you eat meat and eat seafood, it's meat, poultry, eggs, dairy, and seafood. Those will give you protein broken down into amino acids to support muscle repair and growth. And then we want to have those fruits and veggies. We talked about plant foods, but really we want to make sure we get those fruits and veggies on a regular basis. They give us antioxidants. Those are nutrients and plant compounds that help repair damage that can happen to our muscles during activity. We don't want to forget hydration. That's important for all things health, but certainly for activity, it helps to prevent things like fatigue and muscle cramping. So these are the foods to think about for activity. And again, it's whichever kind of variety that you enjoy. And it's really just building on that plant forward foundation to ensure you have these foods regularly. They're going to work in concert to help fuel your movement. And I will share a resource later that can give you a little bit deeper look at some of these foods to include depending on what type of activity and before, during, and after. So that's supporting health and fueling movement. For those last two bullets, I kind of put them together because there's a lot of overlap between honoring our cultures and traditions and enjoying foods that make us happy. It could mean enjoying cuisine that's part of your culture or just taking part in family traditions. So I have 3 boys at home, and every fall we have a tradition of going out and getting apple cider donuts. And in fact, it might even be the end of summer because we basically are getting them as soon as they're available. We do that on the weekends. It's a piece of our family tradition. So it's our tradition, but the donuts also, I gotta be honest, they make me happy. I enjoy eating them, and I promise you, my boys are happy when they eat them too. So you can see that these are there's a lot of overlap there. Now, one of the reasons we talk about this in terms of healthy eating and our philosophy is because food traditions and food preferences, they're part of who we are as people. Like that donut, that's wrapped up in who I am as a mom and the types of memories and formative experiences that I want to provide for my kids. And that, of course, will be a piece of who they are. And also some of these foods that are important to us are often considered unhealthy. So think of those donuts that I said. If I said donuts, a lot of people might jump and say, well, that's not a good food. Or think of just simply white rice. It's prominent in so many cuisines across the world. In fact, you see it pictured here with one of our recipes for Kwanzaa. But often there's a judgment that the healthier choice would be brown rice because it's a whole grain. The healthier choice would be to not have a donut. But what we want to remember is that what matters for health is your pattern of eating, not these individual foods in isolation. And we want to recognize that there is a place and a purpose to all foods, especially when they're important to us for these reasons. We also know that sharing in food connects us with others. And I think one of the best examples of us all experiencing this together was during the pandemic. Think of how many Zoom dinners. I don't know if any of you participated in it. I certainly did, because we recognize the importance of coming together around food. Or if just even holiday meals or traditions like Friday night pizza with friends. Connection with food lifts us up. It improves our mood. It improves our emotional health. And it's kind of regardless of the actual food that's on the table. And that's an important piece. And then allowing space for these foods can help to reduce stress around food when you are allowing that space for your culturally important foods or foods that make you happy. The reason this is a piece of healthy eating and health is just because stress in general, feeling physical stress has a physical effect. It increases stress hormones that have a kind of negative effect on health. But on the flip side, if you have some peace about the choices that you're making, you have some happiness that you're enjoying, that's a healthy relationship with food. And it can have a positive physical and emotional effect. And all of this clears the way for us to tune into our body cues. So much of where we see people struggle is this kind of constant battle between what they think they should eat and what they want to eat or what they enjoy eating. And that struggle can sometimes become so loud that we can miss or misinterpret body signals like hunger or fullness, or that ability to let your body kind of lead you to foods that will help you to feel nourished. So what we want is that space to hear what our body's saying, kind of neutralize the negative narrative so we can just listen to our bodies and respond to what they're telling us. So within this kind of concept, I can't really say what specific foods to eat because they're going to be based on your cultures, your traditions, the foods that make you happy. There might have even been some that popped into your mind while I was talking here. So all of these things are important to healthy eating, because healthy eating and what to eat is just about as much about physical health as it is emotional health and our relationship to food. So that's kind of that first piece of our puzzle here. So healthy eating, tell me what to eat. Well, simplest basic form, plant forward pattern of eating that will fuel your movement and allowing space for those foods that are important to you from a cultural or traditional aspect, or because you just enjoy them. And now there's not one right way to do this, but how do you do this? That's kind of what to do, but now how to do it. Let's think about a way to start putting some of this into action. So to make it happen, let me suggest that we think about 3 steps: to reflect, to reimagine, and to kind of recharge. Starting with reflect, this is a really important piece. So hopefully I've convinced you to start with a plant forward pattern of eating, but maybe there's another type of diet or dietary approach that you're considering. Before you take a step, think about what has worked well in the past. Most of you have been down this road before, right? You know what things have worked well for you. Identify those and pull them forward because they helped you feel your best, right? And then equally as important, think about what hasn't worked well. And I urge you to fight the urge to think to yourself, well, what have I failed out at in the past? Because it wasn't a failure, right? There's not things that you didn't do well. You found ways that did not work for you. That is crucially important feedback and information, because you don't want to do it again. Unless something has drastically changed, leave those things behind. Now you're fine-tuning the things that you know about where you've been and where you're going. And then ask, how long can I do this for? Can this really become permanent? Do I really feel like this is resonating with me? There's a couple things you could ask yourself here. Like, would you be eating foods that are going to require you to have separate meals from those around you? Like you're going to have a totally different plate of food from your family or loved ones. And how does that make you feel? Do you feel like you could do that long term? Will there be nutrient gaps? So are you thinking about adopting a pattern that's going to omit totally certain foods or certain food groups? And are there going to be nutrient gaps? And if so, what's your plan for addressing those? Because those will need to be addressed. Can you afford the food? Now, we firmly believe that healthy eating not just can be, but is affordable. But there are certain dietary approaches that will recommend specific foods that can be more expensive. So how long can you afford that for? Can you afford it in the long term? And very, very important, will you enjoy eating this way? Like I said, food should make you happy. At the very least, it should not make you unhappy. So if you are feeling like you are not going to like this way of eating, don't do it. because that's not going to be fun. It's going to take up time that you could be learning other things that do work for you. And we do know that most people wouldn't stick with something if they're eating it just because they think they have to and not because they enjoy it. So really good questions to ask yourself. Lastly, what barriers can I expect? So knowing, like, if you're thinking about adopting a plant-forward pattern of eating, maybe you're going to start with vegetables and you're thinking, well, here's some barriers. Maybe you don't know how to select vegetables, or you don't know how to prepare them, or maybe you don't have time to prepare them. So recognizing those barriers, don't let the barriers stop you. Just think about what's your plan for addressing them. Now, you could just kind of jot this down and think about it, but I will share in a few slides here a goal setting worksheet that we have that's really helpful for folks who like to have some structure that can take you from your big goal all the way down to small steps you can take, including those that can address these barriers. So that's the reflection piece. Now let's reimagine. So you've thought about where you've been and where you're going, but make sure you take a minute to think about what healthy eating is actually going to look like. Too often, I still have folks say to me that it's about rabbit food, or people think they just need to eat salads, or that it can't include the foods that they love. I am here to tell you that is just not the case. So please let this moment stick with you that we are going to shatter that belief and we are going to reimagine healthy eating. It can be colorful, it can be vibrant, it can be delicious, and it can include all of the foods that you love. Here you see all sorts of different recipes from Wegmans that happen to be plant forward, but you see pasta, you see pizza. There is not a reason these foods cannot be a piece of your healthy eating pattern because they're plant forward, they're delicious, and they check a lot of the boxes for us. So whatever that is for you, whatever foods you love, making sure you're checking them against your movement. Are they fueling whatever joyful movement is in your life? And are they making you happy? Are you honoring your cultures and traditions and really enjoying those foods? Now, the last piece is to recharge. Lots of different ways to recharge and think about what's going to provide that spark. So we want to suggest some inspiration for you. Please visit wegmans.com/feelyourbest if you have not already. We call it our Feel Your Best page. This is our hub of all of our best nutrition, healthy eating, education, information, videos, even products and meal solutions. This is where you're going to find hopefully some wonderful things to provide that spark. So you go, you explore, and you navigate to what speaks to you and resonates with you because there's lots of different paths to take. And I want to show you a few things that you'll find here. And in a few slides, I'll walk you through a couple of key pieces I want to make sure you know about. But here you'll find our healthy eating philosophy. You'll find some information on healthy eating habits. That's where you will find that goal setting worksheet that I mentioned. It's also where you'll find some information on habits that can help support any health goal. So it's really great to get started there. That next bullet, whole body health, you'll find guidance there on how to take a plant-forward pattern of eating and really focus on foods to support your specific health needs or interests. So things like brain health, immune health. I saw a few folks had asked when they registered about anti-inflammatory eating. You'll find some information on that there too. So really plant forward is your big starting point, but then you can kind of start to chop it down into what's important to you in terms of preferences or interests or health needs. So deeper dives into foods to eat for different areas. Plant forward, I'm going to talk about in a minute, but that is where you'll find that. Eat Like a Pro is where I mentioned you will find information on foods to fuel movement. Food freedom is really about removing that negative narrative around food and removing judgment and helping to find your way to being able to hear what your body cues are. So, and of course, so much more. So the couple of things I really wanted to show you is first starting with plant forward eating. So from those Feel Your Best pages, wegmans.com/feelyourbest, you'll go to the special diets and eating approaches, and you'll find a plant forward lifestyles page. If you click on that, you'll be greeted with this beautiful picture of plant forward food. Well, there's weekly meal ideas there. There's also a few short videos on plant forward eating. So really great place to start or continue a plant forward journey. But if you want a little more guidance, because I know folks are like, well, how much and which foods, we'd suggest checking out our Wegmans Healthy Eating Guidelines. So again, from that Feel Your Best page, you'll go to whole body health and anti-inflammatory eating. You'll find them there. And these were developed by our nutrition team. They outline a plant-forward pattern of eating and provide a little bit more detail on serving sizes or portions to consider and how often to enjoy certain foods over the course of the day or the week. Now, if this isn't quite your style, so plant forward's like kind of interesting to you, but you've really been interested in some other trending diets and you want to get some inspiration on those, let me show you a great resource we have on that. Now, before I show you this, I want to also mention another way to get to our Feel Your Best pages is from our Wegmans.com homepage. That's what you see here. So you can simply click on health and nutrition, and you'll see that it'll bring you to our Feel Your Best pages. Scroll down to the special diets and eating approaches. You'll click on other diets and then on trending diets at the top. And there you will find a link to a PDF that explores different trending diets. So you can get an overview of things like whole foods, plant-based, keto, overview and maybe some potential drawbacks, potential benefits, just things to consider if this is of interest to you. The next resource I want to provide to you is where to find all of these wonderful webinars that we do and some videos. So again, what we're talking about today is just the tip of the iceberg, and this is where you can take a deeper dive into some specific topics. So from our Feel Your Best page, you'll see that right here, right at the front here, we've got on-demand nutrition webinars, and you'll just click see videos and you'll find our nutrition team here exploring lots of different types of topics like living gluten-free, living with type 2 diabetes, short videos on plant-forward eating with your pasta. It's a really wonderful treasure trove there, so please check that out. And then last tool I want to show you is our meal planning tool. This one's really cool. We get lots of questions of I want some recipes. People just want recipes. We know it. But you also all have very different needs. I have different needs. So you have different amount of time available. You have different preferences in terms of food or ingredients. So if you go to wegmans.com/meals, that is going to bring you to our meal planning tool. If you scroll down, you answer questions like how much time do you have? Well, I've got about 30 minutes. That's what I clicked here. And then what are you craving? Well, Kirby just told me I should probably eat some more plants. Maybe I'll grab some meatless, some plant forward, but I also like some seafood. And maybe you happen to have a need for lactose-free recipes. So you click show me my meals. You'll find some seasonal recipes at the bottom there, but here's a nice collection of meals that meet all of those needs. But then we go in and you'll see that next step, this is kind of how am I going to make it happen? Maybe one of your barriers is I just forget to add it to my list. So here you can very easily add your recipe ingredients right to your list by clicking that plus right there. So really wonderful tool. There's so much more there, but I wanted to point those out so those of you who are looking to get started can find that spark, the inspiration, and to know, again, there's no one right way to do this. We come back to this touchstone, the philosophy of finding what makes you feel nourished, what makes you feel your best, both body and mind, and accomplishes the very important goals of supporting health, fueling movement, honoring your cultures and traditions, and very important, making you happy. So with that, I will stop this. I'm going to ask my friend Marta to come back and see if we got any questions.
We did. That was so awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kirby.
So thank you, Marta.
Very informative. Now, before we get started on the Q&A, I do want to remind everybody about the link to the survey that I put over in the chat, because we would really love to hear your thoughts, get your feedback so we can really help us grow and be better in our webinars. Okay, Kirby. So we received a lot of questions about protein. So how much do I need? When do I need it? How do I incorporate it? What about if I'm a vegetarian? Well, how can you address those? Can you address all of those?
Well, I can address all of them, sort of. So let me start with, I heard you say, how much do I need? And since that's a very common one that we get, I will share that there's an RDA, a recommended dietary allowance for protein. That's basically the amount to consume to prevent deficiency. Good news is that most of us need it, but if you're wondering what it is, it's about 7 grams of protein for every 20 pounds of body weight. But because that's a big topic, you just rattled off a lot of questions that we have within that. What I would like to share is that we do have a page on our website that really explores this topic, including ways to optimize protein. So not just to get enough to prevent deficiency, but ways to really optimize your intake of that That is on our Feel Your Best page under Whole Body Health. Folks will find a link to Protein Power, I think it's called. So there's really great information that dives into that topic. We also have that planned as one of our upcoming webinar topics. So you can come back to that YouTube playlist that I showed you when you click on our webinar and videos link on our Feel Your Best page, and you'll see that there in the near future. So hopefully that will answer all your protein questions.
Awesome. Now, what about ultra processed food? That's such a hot topic. We got some questions about that. How do I find those? How do I know what's ultra processed?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I know I mentioned it at the beginning too, to try to not have too many of those. So, and just a little background on that, the ultra processed foods, it's really when we see a high intake of these foods that we start to see a link with some kind of negative health outcomes. So, unfortunately, there's not an easy, very straightforward way to identify ultra processed foods. They don't come labeled as ultra processed, and there's some debate about what's truly ultra processed, but there is some really good guidance that we've received from a couple of institutions, including Harvard Health, that basically ultra processed foods are going to be those that are made from substances that are kind of taken out of food. So those are going to be things like starches, fats, oils, added sugars, and things like that. So the quickest way to see that is really with the ingredient list. So when you flip a product label or flip to the product label and you see that there's quite a few substances that look like they were extracted from the food and there's not a lot of whole foods listed, that's an indication it might be ultra processed. You can also look at the food itself. If you can actually see actual pieces of food in there, that's probably minimally processed. But if it's kind of ground up and pushed into a little shape, that might be ultra processed. And I do want to just make a side note too, that some of the foods that might be considered ultra processed actually are an exception to what I said about the link to negative health outcomes. Things like whole grain breads and cereals that might be ultra processed, and yogurts, we actually see that those are connected with some health benefits. So that was a little bit more than what you asked, but I wanted to make sure that we give that full context because, as you said, it's kind of an up and coming conversation. So
yeah, absolutely. Thanks. And we have one more question. I think we have time for one more question. I think a really good one is, what about the difference between frozen and canned vegetables versus fresh, or dried beans versus canned beans, that sort of thing?
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, fresh, frozen, dried, canned, all of these offer the same general health benefits. So there's not a significant enough difference nutritionally for anybody to really worry about. So whatever form works for your taste preferences or budget, that's great. That's what we want to do, especially when it comes to produce. So frozen veggies, frozen fruit, canned veggies, all great. You said beans, those are the major difference between dried beans and canned beans can be sodium. So one thing with dried beans is that the advantage is that you can control what goes into them. You don't have to add any sodium. They're usually a little bit more affordable. Canned beans are already pretty affordable, but canned beans are convenient. So the dried beans you typically have to soak. But if you're worried about the sodium with the canned beans, you can just rinse and drain them, and that can reduce the sodium quite a bit. So generally speaking, not big health differences there, but if you're starting to look at, or not big nutrition differences, the health benefits will basically be the same across the board. So just those kind of differences in the nutrients.
I love canned
sodium.
beans. Yeah, canned beans are the best. They're so convenient and easy and help you get your fiber and all that good stuff.
So. I love fiber. Awesome. So perfect.
That brings us up on time. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining us. We really appreciated that one so quickly. Please join us again. We'd love to have you. And thanks, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.